This story probably won't scare anyone else, but it really scared me when it happened. Hell, it scares me just looking back on it. When I got out of college, I immediately got a job. Problem was, it didn't really pay enough for me to get a place of my own. So I knew I had to find a roommate. Fortunately for me, I didn't have to use any roommate ads. My friend Greg knew a guy named Todd who'd been looking for a roommate, so he introduced us. Todd seemed like an okay guy. If anything, he seemed a little snooty, like a guy who was raised in a rich family and just never lost the attitude. However, when he showed me his apartment, it was apparent that Todd still did have a lot of money. The place was enormous and very, very nice. It made me wonder why the guy needed a roommate. But rather than ask, I just counted myself lucky. I could afford the rent, and I would be living in a place that was worth a lot more than I was paying for it. Living with Todd was rather easy. He was always out partying with his friends or going somewhere. His dad paid all of his bills. I guess that should have made me wonder again why he needed a roommate, but I didn't question it. Don't look a gift horse in the mouth, right? When Todd was home, he also never gave me any trouble. The first time something odd happened was when my favorite hoodie disappeared. I spent a long time searching all over the apartment for it, and it was nowhere to be found. I wore the thing nearly all the time. It was almost the only shirt I wore the entire time I was in college, but it was gone. I cursed myself, thinking that maybe I had lost it at the laundromat. I was pretty upset. It was only about a week later, and after another trip to do laundry, that I noticed that a relatively new pair of jeans I bought were missing. It was a $40 pair of jeans. Not having the kind of money to keep replacing clothing, losing those at the laundromat was a pretty devastating blow. It seemed to me, for a couple of weeks, that I stopped losing articles of clothing. I went to the laundromat once a week, and I took to thoroughly checking the washer and the dryer after I unloaded them. Unfortunately, my missing clothes had not turned up in the lost and found. When I returned home from the laundromat, about 5 weeks after my hoodie went missing, I was hanging up my clothes. I went to put away my underwear when I noticed that my underwear drawer was open. And of course, I could have left it open myself, but it was uneven on the sides, which got me thinking I wouldn't have left it that way. I opened the drawer, and a weird thought hit me. I wondered if maybe Todd had been taking my clothes while I was gone. Maybe he was some guy who liked to smell other guys' clothes or something. I searched through the underwear drawer, and lo and behold, there was a pair missing. It was a pair of sexy black Euro trunks that I tended to always wear on dates. I knew Todd wasn't home, so I decided I'd sneak into his room and see if my clothes were in there. Going into the room, I got the shock of my life when I saw a line of mannequins lined up against one wall of the room. Normally, this wouldn't be too weird, except one of them was wearing my missing hoodie and jeans. Having a really disturbing thought, I walked over to the mannequin and unzipped him. Yep, he was wearing the black Euros. I didn't know what Todd's deal was, and I really didn't want to find out. Over the next couple days, I slowly moved my things into storage while he wasn't at home. On the last day, I took my clothes back, and when I was totally out of the apartment, I found a hotel room to live in for a while. Number 2. Blood. I rented a room in an apartment in Chicago back in 2011. I saw the apartment on Craigslist and immediately liked it. I'm a guy, but it was being rented out by a girl. She said she wanted a guy roommate anyway, because she really didn't get along with girls that well. And that was fine by me. It was a really nice apartment, and I was getting a hell of a deal living there. It turns out that her best friend lived on the bottom floor of the building. She was on the top floor. Her best friend was a guy named Brian. A really flaming queen, but he was a really nice guy from what I could tell. We actually didn't talk too much. Occasionally, my roommate would bitch about him and his drama, but that never really seemed to carry on for too long. Her friend was dating a guy that she really didn't like. She kept telling him to break up with the guy, but he wouldn't. She, in fact, hated the guy so much that her insistence on them breaking up got them into a fight. One day, my roommate came stomping up the stairs, cursing her best friend's name. She said they had really gotten into a bad argument over his boyfriend, and their friendship was over. Now keep in mind that these two had been friends since they knew each other in elementary school. It was later that night that we were both woken up by a loud pounding on the door. I didn't do anything at first, because I heard her go and answer it. I heard a lot of screaming coming from someone, and my roommate was really panicked. I had only been living with her for a month or so at this point, but I got up and decided to see if I could help out. The bathroom for the apartment was right by the apartment door. It was an immaculate white bathroom, but when I looked in on it, it was red. It was covered in blood. My roommate was at the door, and she was trying to calm her best friend down. She saw I was up and asked if I could help. Looking down at him, I had never seen a human being so soaked in blood before. His skull and his neck were split open. It was everywhere. He was panicking, crying and screaming. Apparently, he and his boyfriend had gotten into a fight. The boyfriend had grabbed a wine bottle, broken it, and had slashed the guy up pretty bad. I was standing in the hallway, right by the entrance to the apartment. My roommate hadn't closed the door when she let her best friend in. It was slightly open. It was the movement of the door that caught my eye, and in a split second, I saw a guy in the dark hallway, standing there and holding a broken and bloodied wine bottle in his hand. My roommate and her friend saw the door moving, although they weren't in a position to see who it was. But they knew. Her friend started screaming at the top of his lungs. I had never heard a more disturbed cry in my entire life. Even thinking about it now gives me chills. Fortunately, I reacted quickly. Right when the violent boyfriend tried to move into the apartment, I pulled my foot up and kicked the door. The door hit the jackass right in the face, causing him to drop the wine bottle to the floor. It shattered. He stumbled back in the hallway, and I latched the door and locked it. I then left and called the police. They informed me that they had already been called by another neighbor, and they came and arrested the boyfriend. An ambulance came about 10 minutes later, and they took my roommate and her friend to the hospital. About 2 hours later, I was sitting in the kitchen, having a much-needed glass of wine. I heard someone calling out, "Brian! Brian!" After a few moments, I heard it again. "Brian! Brian!" I was pretty freaked out, thinking that the violent boyfriend had posted bond or something and was back. Fortunately, he wasn't. It was just a friend of Brian's who came over, because he wasn't answering his cell phone. I wish I could explain the chill I got, though. Sad thing is, once that night was over, Brian went back to being a bit of a douche again. He never thanked either of us for helping him that night. And he did start dating the guy who had slashed him up. Some people never learn. Number 3. First roommate. I wanted to move out of my parents' house as soon as I could. It was nothing against them. I loved my parents. I just didn't want to be one of those guys who stayed at their house well into his 20s. So when I was 18, I began looking for a place to live. And I looked in what I thought was the best place to find one. Craigslist. I found this guy, let's call him Carl. After meeting and talking for a short while, he offered me the room. I almost didn't take it though, because I found Carl to be a little creepy. He was one of those guys that I really couldn't get a read on. Whenever I talked to him, he always just stood there, with a big grin on his face. His expression never changed while he listened. So I never knew if he was really interested in what I had to say. But then again, we were just trying to be roommates. That didn't mean we had to be friends. So the first couple months of living with Carl was pretty easygoing. He didn't bother me, and I didn't bother him. Occasionally, we would cross each other's paths and make a little small talk. But for the most part, nothing strange happened. I think the first time I thought something was off was when I was sleeping, and I could have sworn I heard my door open. However, when I opened my eyes and looked over at it, it was closed. I had been asleep when I heard it, so I could have been dreaming, or maybe I imagined it. However, about 3 days later, when I woke up in the morning, I found that my door was ajar. I knew something was up then. I couldn't sleep with my door open. As far back as I could remember, even if I were home alone, my door would always be closed while I slept. Well, I asked Carl later that day if he had opened my door, perhaps to ask me a question or something. He denied ever having opened my door. I really didn't have any proof that he did. Plus, I didn't want to give up such a good living arrangement, so I didn't call him on it. A few nights later when I was in bed, I'm not sure what it was, but something caused me to stir. I opened my eyes just a tiny bit. When I did, I scanned the room. I was shocked to see that Carl was in my room. He was sitting in a chair by my door. He was looking right at me. And in his hand, I saw the glint of a knife. Unsure what to do, I was sure that Carl had not noticed I had woke up, so I tried not to move. I kept my eyes open just the tiniest bit. I tried to keep my breathing even so he wouldn't notice I was awake. I can't explain how hard all of this was, though. I also can't explain how scary all this was. He looked back at me. He would then occasionally look away for a few moments before turning his gaze back to me. I don't know what time it was when I had woken up. My clock was on my end table, and I was too scared to look over at it. I had no idea how long Carl was in my room, sitting in the chair, unaware that I was really awake. Eventually, though, after what seemed like an eternity, he got up quietly. He slowly opened the door, watching me, probably trying to make sure I wouldn't wake up. He moved the chair out of the room, and then quietly pulled the door closed behind him. I have no idea what the freak was up to, and I didn't want to know. I moved my things back into my parents' house the following day. I'd rather be the kid who lived with his parents through his 20s than the guy killed in his sleep by his roommate. Hey y'all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, please consider hitting the subscribe button below, or the icon of Ichigo that will appear at the end of the closing. Feel free to leave a comment to let me know what you think of the video, and consider sharing it with someone you think might enjoy it. You can follow Ichigo and me on Facebook and Twitter by using the links in the description. If you have a story you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the email provided in the description. I'm much later this week than I have been lately, but don't fret. My goal is to have videos Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Those who follow me on Twitter will probably have a better idea what's been going on this week, even though I've gotten awfully quiet the past few days. I myself have had a terrifying roommate experience this week, but now it's all been taken care of. I don't want to go into too much detail at the moment. Suffice to say, it put me in the mood to tell some scary roommate stories, and everybody is safe. I may go ahead and tell the story at a later date, though, but just rest assured that me and the cats are doing just fine. I'll get us caught up on videos over the weekend and start tweeting again. In the meantime, don't forget to make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.